For millions of people, he was Archie Bunker, the lovable bigot from Queens whose armchair became as iconic as any royal throne. All in the Family wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural earthquake. It shook up American society in the 1970s, dominated the ratings, and turned its star, Carroll O'Connor, into one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. For 5 straight seasons, it was the #1 show in the country, a feat that cemented its place in television history. O'Connor was the undisputed king of TV comedy, and the chair he sat in now famously resides in the Smithsonian, a monument to the character's impact, but behind all the laughter and awards, a storm was brewing. Carroll O'Connor, the man who gave Archie life, was on a collision course with the network that made him a superstar. The role of a lifetime was nearly cut short by a network contingency plan, a secret strategy that would have seen Archie Bunker erased from television forever. This is the story of a bitter contract dispute that pushed the most popular show on earth to the brink. It's the story of a co-star who was unknowingly dropped into the center of the firestorm, an actor who was, for a few tense weeks, poised to take over the Bunker household. And it's the story of a deep professional wound, a coldness that Carroll O'Connor would carry long after the cameras stopped rolling. The man at the center of it all? An actor you know very well, but whose role in this secret drama has remained a little-known chapter in Hollywood history, James Cromwell. Before he was Archie Bunker, Carroll O'Connor was a highly educated, classically trained actor. Born in Manhattan and raised in Queens, his real-life political views were the exact opposite of the character that would define his career. He was a liberal intellectual who had even worked as an English teacher before dedicating himself to acting. When the script for a wild new sitcom, based on a British show called Till Death Us Do Us Part, landed in his hands, O'Connor was living and working in Italy. He was, to put it mildly, skeptical. He famously told his wife that a character as prejudiced as Archie Bunker would never survive on American television. He was convinced the networks were too timid to air something so controversial. Believing it would be a quick flop, he took the job with one strange condition: he demanded that the producer, Norman Lear, give him a round-trip ticket back to Rome. He honestly expected to be back in Italy in a few weeks. Of course, he never used that return ticket. All in the Family wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. After a slow start in January 1971, it exploded in popularity, winning the Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series in its very first season. At the heart of the show was the electric dynamic between the 4 people crammed into 704 Hauser Street. Archie, his sweet but long-suffering wife Edith, his liberal daughter Gloria, and his son-in-law, Mike Stivic, who Archie lovingly called Meathead. The show dove headfirst into topics that had always been off-limits for TV: racism, the Vietnam War, women's rights, and sexuality. It was loud, raw, and brutally honest. And holding it all together was O'Connor's masterful performance. He didn't just play Archie, he became him, giving the bigot a layer of vulnerability that made him compelling, even to people who hated his views. O'Connor himself argued that the key to the show's success was that every American knew an Archie Bunker. His performance was showered with praise. He was nominated for 8 Emmys for the role and won 4 times. He became the face of CBS, the anchor of its entire primetime lineup. He was, by all accounts, indispensable. The idea of All in the Family without Archie was simply unthinkable. But as O'Connor's fame and power grew, so did his belief that he deserved more creative control, more respect, and a lot more money. That conviction would lead to a battle that threatened to tear down everything he had helped build. The Bunker living room was a battlefield of ideas, but the arguments between Archie and Meathead were often nothing compared to the fights happening off-camera. The main source of tension was the relationship between Carroll O'Connor and the show's creator, Norman Lear. While they shared a deep respect for one another, their creative process was often a brutal tug-of-war. Lear once described their relationship as very stressful. He recalled that O'Connor would come to every table read unhappy, armed with a red pen, ready to challenge the script by declaring, "It just doesn't work." O'Connor admitted their ideas about comedy were totally different, claiming his vision for a more naturalistic style ultimately won out. In a later interview, O'Connor even confessed to being very nasty with Lear, acknowledging that he used his power to drive everyone on set a little crazy. This wasn't just ego. O'Connor was fiercely protective of Archie Bunker. He felt his own educated background gave him a special insight into prejudice that he believed the writers sometimes missed. He was constantly pushing for more depth, for moments that showed the wounded person hiding beneath Archie's loudmouth exterior. He ad-libbed often, and some of the show's most powerful scenes, like a drunken heart-to-heart with Mike in a locked storeroom, came from O'Connor and Rob Reiner improvising and digging deeper. The dynamic with Rob Reiner, who played Mike, was another source of creative energy. Their on-screen shouting matches were legendary, fueled by a genuine clash of perspectives. O'Connor, the classically trained actor, often bumped heads with Reiner's younger, more improvisational style. But this tension was almost entirely professional. Reiner later said the anger you saw on screen was real, but it was born from a shared passion for getting the story right. He saw O'Connor as a mentor who taught him to trust a good script. Even Sally Struthers, who played Gloria, had her frustrations, at one point suing to get out of her contract because she felt her character wasn't growing. But the central conflict was always between O'Connor and Lear. This constant state of joyful stress, as Lear called it, was taking its toll. O'Connor felt he was carrying the immense weight of the show's success and deserved more say. That simmering resentment was about to boil over into a full-blown crisis. By the summer of 1974, All in the Family was a national institution, and Carroll O'Connor knew his worth. As the team prepared for the 5th season, O'Connor decided it was time to renegotiate. This wasn't just about money, though that was part of it. It was about respect. In July 1974, just as production was supposed to start, he went on strike. The dispute went public almost immediately. O'Connor sued Norman Lear's company, Tandem Productions, for $64,000 in what he called back pay. But his real demands were about his working conditions. He felt the TV production schedule was grueling and wanted things to change. O'Connor later downplayed the money angle, telling the Associated Press, "They assumed it was money. Salary was not in question, although I did want certain back money due me. I wanted different working conditions." He felt he was fighting for a more bearable life against unfairly binding contracts. Norman Lear and CBS were in an impossible spot. Their biggest star was refusing to work, and the new season was right around the corner. At first, they tried to play hardball. The writers scrambled to write scripts without their lead character. When the 5th season premiered, Archie Bunker was gone. The show explained that he had gone to a convention in Buffalo and simply vanished. For 3 episodes, Edith, Gloria, and Mike were left to worry, mirroring the real-life drama. Behind the scenes, the fight got ugly. Lear was furious. He reportedly got a court order to stop O'Connor from taking any other acting jobs. Then he went to the press with a shocking threat: if O'Connor didn't come back, the character of Archie Bunker would be written out of the show for good. It was a high-stakes game of chicken. The writers were told to get ready for the unthinkable, a version of All in the Family without Archie. The network knew the show was too valuable to just let it die. If they couldn't have O'Connor, they would need a new plan. And that contingency plan started to take shape. While the writers worked on storylines about Archie's disappearance, a new character was introduced in the very first episode of the season, Where's Archie? His name was Jerome Cunningham, but everyone called him Stretch. Played by a tall, lanky actor named James Cromwell, Stretch was one of Archie's buddies from the loading dock. He was there to help the family through the crisis, a friendly face in a tough time. But his presence may have served a much bigger, secret purpose. Stretch Cunningham was, according to many accounts of the time, Norman Lear's Plan B. He was the contingency. While never officially confirmed by Lear, the timing was suspicious. If Carroll O'Connor refused to return, the writers were prepared to kill off Archie Bunker in an off-screen accident. The rumor that has persisted for decades is that the story would then pivot. Stretch, Archie's grieving friend, would move into the Bunker house to help support Edith and the family. Some versions of the story even suggest a romance was planned between Stretch and the widowed Edith. James Cromwell, for his part, was completely in the dark. He was a working actor, thrilled to land a part on the biggest show on TV. He had no clue he was potentially being positioned as the successor to one of television's most iconic characters. He was an innocent bystander in a massive power struggle. For a few tense weeks, it seemed entirely possible that audiences would tune in one night to learn that Archie Bunker was never coming home. Killing off the lead of a #1 show was an incredible gamble that could either save the series or destroy it completely. The pressure was immense. CBS executives were panicking, Lear was facing the dismantling of his greatest creation, and O'Connor was at a crossroads. The fate of the show came down to one last-ditch negotiation. The standoff couldn't last. The thought of losing All in the Family was too much for the network to handle. A top CBS executive reportedly met with O'Connor at a bar on the day of the network's deadline. After a long conversation, a deal was finally struck. The crisis was over. O'Connor returned to the set. In the third episode of the arc, Archie Bunker finally walked back through his front door, and the show was saved. But for Carroll O'Connor, something had changed. During the dispute, he learned just how far the network was willing to go. He found out about the contingency plan, the strategy to kill him off and potentially replace him. The knowledge that the producers were so ready to discard him, to put another actor in his place in Archie's own home, left a deep and lasting professional wound. This wasn't about a personal dislike of James Cromwell. The two actors had no real conflict. But for O'Connor, Cromwell's character became a walking, talking reminder of the network's betrayal. He was the ghost of a future that almost happened. According to many reports, O'Connor grew deeply uncomfortable having his potential replacement hanging around. This feeling festered. While Cromwell appeared in a couple more episodes, O'Connor's feelings didn't soften. James Cromwell himself later confirmed this, stating plainly in an interview, "Carroll O'Connor just didn't want me on the show." He recalled telling co-star Sally Struthers he'd love to do more episodes, but her offer to speak to O'Connor on his behalf went nowhere. He wouldn't have it, Cromwell said. A couple of seasons later, in an episode titled, Stretch Cunningham, Goodbye, the character dies of a heart attack. Archie, asked to give the eulogy, is shocked to learn at the funeral that his old friend was Jewish, a classic all-in-the-family moment that forces him to confront his own prejudice. James Cromwell wasn't in the episode, but it was all about his character. It was a brilliant piece of television, but it was also the final act of a tense, behind-the-scenes drama. The unwitting replacement was now officially gone, reportedly at the insistence of the man he was briefly hired to replace. Being pushed off the biggest show on television could have ended an actor's career. For James Cromwell, it was the opposite. He later said that O'Connor's decision to get rid of him was a great favor. He explained that if he had stayed, he might have ended up as another Fonzie, an actor totally identified with one character. Freed from the Bunker household, Cromwell went on to build one of the most respected careers in Hollywood. He became a celebrated character actor, earning an Oscar nomination for playing Farmer Hoggett in the movie Babe. He's appeared in hundreds of films and shows, from L.A. Confidential and The Green Mile to Succession, earning multiple Emmy nominations along the way. His uncomfortable exit from All in the Family ended up being a blessing in disguise. Carroll O'Connor, of course, continued his legendary run as Archie Bunker for several more years, through All in the Family and its successor, Archie Bunker's Place. He would forever be linked to that role, but he also found great success later, starring in the drama In the Heat of the Night. The coldness from the 1974 dispute wasn't a personal feud in the classic sense. It was a professional scar. He never publicly attacked Cromwell, but ensuring his character was removed from the show spoke volumes about how deeply he felt about the network's plan. The story of Carroll O'Connor and James Cromwell is a fascinating look at the brutal realities of show business, where loyalty is temporary and even the biggest star can be seen as replaceable. This wasn't a loud, explosive feud. It was a quiet, Cold War born from a contract negotiation and a secret plan that cut to the heart of an actor's identity. Carroll O'Connor fought for his worth and won, but in the process, he learned just how vulnerable he was. He saw that the network, despite all the success, was always ready for a future without him. That realization created a professional grudge that, while not personal toward James Cromwell, was strong enough to get the actor's character written off the show. It was a raw display of power, O'Connor's way of erasing the living symbol of his near-demise. In the end, everyone came out on top. All in the Family continued its historic run, O'Connor cemented his legacy, and James Cromwell, the unwitting replacement, was set free to become one of the most versatile actors of his generation. It's a complicated story with no clear villain, proving that in Hollywood, the most dramatic stories are often the ones that happen when the cameras aren't rolling.